I had done surveys to understand better how these power imbalances were manifesting and how consent was being violated and by whom, I began to realize that this was also a problem for men who had heard no a lot and had become very resentful about it. I think people don't really understand the level of low-key terror that marginalized people are just expected to live with and tolerate all the time. That is a possibility anytime you say no. And that is just unacceptable to me.
Hello, and welcome to Power Beyond Pride, a weekly queer change-making podcast bringing you voices and ideas from across our fierce and fabulous spectrum to transform our world. I'm Shane Lukas. I'm a lifelong activist, owner of a great idea, and just a ginger, fiery space rocket.
And I'm Hunter. I'm 3 feral raccoons in a trench coat. We are your co-hosts on today's Queercast journey. In this episode, we are talking to Kitty Stryker, activist, journalist, published writer, and authority on developing consent culture in alternative communities. Kitty describes herself as an anarchist, activist, queer femme, juggalo ethnographer, and a leftist doomsday prepper.
She's also one of my favorite writers in the world and founder of consentculture.com. It's a website that's run for 4 years as a hub for LGBTQ+, kinky, poly folks looking for sex-critical approach to relationships, and became the foundation for her first book, Ask, Building Consent Culture. Welcome, Kitty. So great to have you.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
We are so honored to have you on this episode of Power Beyond Pride. I love the description. Like all the different... Yeah, I'm like leftist doomsday prepper, juggalo ethnographer. Okay. Pick something, and I would love to hear all about it.
Well, I mean, I guess leftist doomsday prepper is the thing that I've been pretty much my whole life. I think growing up, my parents sort of instilled a lot of anarchist values in me around mutual aid and not trusting the government. So I grew up with this understanding that I needed to know how to grow my own food, how to pluck a chicken, how to run a generator and preserve various kinds of food, how to do medic related things. Like, so all of this stuff of like, how do we take care of each other without an external force coming in? And I would say that, I mean, I love doing that. That's very important to me. And I don't like that those spaces are so often seen as very conservative, seen as very conspiracy minded, because natural disasters happen all the time. I mean, we know that disaster preparedness is important. I guess I like the term doomsday prepper because I enjoy that. I enjoy being a sort of cheerful, optimistic face of a thing that is seen as very scary, big men with guns who are like going out raiding. I'm the total opposite, where I'm like, I'm here to make sure that you don't get an infection because hey, we might not have access to hospitals anymore. And I've only read about cutting off a limb. I'm not really sure if I can do that successfully. How's it going? So it's like very different.
And here's a picnic basket of chicken parts that I just found, which again, I think is phenomenal. That if you can defeather a chicken, I think that's a skill I would say envy. I grew up in the Midwest and I don't know how to pluck a chicken. It's like, I just feel, I mean, I grew up with parents who were like, we want to make sure that we acknowledge where our food comes from. We want to acknowledge that the meat that we eat came from a living creature. We understand, like we understood that things aren't perfect. You can't guarantee, a lot of people can't afford to get non-factory farmed meat, non-factory farmed eggs. I mean, nobody can afford eggs, whether they're factory farmed or not anymore. But I appreciated that my parents instilled in me this desire to have an understanding that if you're going to eat meat, if you're going to ingest dairy, you want the animals that it comes from to have the best life possible. And
I mean, honestly, same with like regular farming. That's like a whole other conversation. But the way that we farm in this country is not sustainable in any way. And we have a lot of food waste because we're just so not attached to the sacrifice and the resources needed to give us food to eat or even to transport food. Yeah, with our current policies, I'm imagining we'll get to know that a lot more deeply soon. So, hooray.
Hunter, I feel like this is music to your ears that you two should both have a gardening community.
Yeah, I'm very much in line with a lot of these things that you're talking about. I actually am hosting some local resourcing events over the spring, summer, and into the fall so I do a lot of urban foraging and all the things that come with homesteading. I've taught myself / grew up learning these things. And so practicing on bringing that to the community in different ways of skill sharing and knowledge building, especially with being in partnership with local farmers.
Yeah.
Because they're very unique and delicate ecosystems. So I always have an appreciation for other people that can like recognize the importance of having gratitude and understanding the privilege that comes with knowing where your food is.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that the United States in general is just so distanced from all of that. I mean, I've been watching like, oh, okay, so the ports are closing down and stuff isn't being brought in from overseas. Yeah. And oh, you've deported all of the people who were doing underpaid, backbreaking labor, picking blueberries and shucking corn and whatever. Okay, interesting. So we won't have any trucks to transport food. We won't have any people to pick the food.
We won't have anything in the trucks to send the trucks.
Right. I mean, like all of these things are interconnected. And if you want to have oranges when they're not in season, like you have to appreciate that there's a huge system that goes into place for that. And it's really easy to disrupt those things. So even if you're not having a localivore attitude, you should really understand that this is an intricate web of interdependent things. One of the things I like to say a lot is that no person is an island. Not even an island is an island. Mm-hmm. I mean, islands rely on other people bringing stuff in and exporting stuff out. So even an island, and I say that in quotations, is part of that web. So I don't know. It's just individualism in general is such a foreign idea to me.
So I have to ask, because Kitty, I think one of like you talked about doomsday prep, it's seen as this very conservative, very anti, I don't know, I want to say kind of a different version of nationalism. I'm curious, because when you talk about it, I think I understand the kind of optimism that you're bringing into the conversation. I'd be curious what, as a potential version of America, or this kind of, what we would come together to create that would be kind of a recognizing and honoring the systems that are present. Like what kind of system would work? So rather than just being, again, kind of let's break all the system down, it sounds like you see that there is a value system. Like you said, nothing is an island, right? It works within systems. What do you envision for those systems to be?
I think the system that works best is flexibility. Everything that I write about is about nuance and about a need for embracing nuance and being flexible. So, I mean, again, I am somebody who both distrusts the federal government, especially now, but also recognizes that welfare systems are extremely important. And I'm not willing to just ignore the South because, the majority of people, not even the majority, the bare majority of people who vote, which is another subcategory, are voting for people like Trump. I'm not willing to just let them fall to the wayside and everyone else who lives there who can't just move. So that's one of the things that, while I do think the United States is too big to have a federal government that's trying to please everybody, I just don't think that's possible. I also think that having it be exclusively states' rights puts a lot of people at risk because lots of folks can't just move if the state that they're in decides that, we don't really care about trans rights anymore, or we don't think that women should have reproductive rights access, or we think child marriage is fine, actually. Like, a lot of people can't just move. And so while I think there's a lot of that kind of sentiment of, again, very individualistic, well, if you don't like it, just leave, that's not financially or practically feasible for many people. Increasingly, it's less and less feasible. So I guess I would like to see, I mean, in general, I would like to see people feel less attached to the whims of the federal government by taking care of each other, by not even as a state or even as a city, but as a literal local neighborhood. If you as a neighborhood can take care of each other and make sure that the person who just got out of the hospital has access to groceries, can make sure that, oh, this person needs childcare, you are around and available to help with that, then issues with whatever the politicians are deciding, is the impact is lessened. And then people are less scared and they're less fixated on voting blue no matter who, and are more focused on, let's vote in people who actually reflect our values. Let's insist on that. We're no longer afraid that, oh, if we don't vote for this milquetoast person, we're going to get a literal fascist. They're going to say, hey, we need somebody who is strong enough to push up against that, who actually represents our values. I mean, granted, I know a lot of anarchists who are like, fuck the whole thing, I don't even want to vote. And I don't blame them. I mean, I vote because I get an absentee ballot. Like, it's literally 2 hours of my time to research the issues on the ballot and vote. Why not? Like, I might as well. It's not most of my year. Most of my year is focused on all of the other things that I can do to create sustainable communities. But I might as well vote. Why not? I just don't understand how people wouldn't bother. I mean, I guess I do get it, but I'm also like, it's such a little thing to do. Why not try it? And if it doesn't work, you weren't counting on it anyway. So who cares? But
I mean, that just sounds like every kink any of us have ever tried to. So I get that.
I mean, fair, but I also want to mention in that the perspective of just try it out is, see if nothing comes of it, then great, you can at least say you tried. But I will say that there's also a privilege in having access and the means to vote and access and the means to educating yourself about those different topics that aren't always available, depending on what somebody is able to collect information wise. If they don't have an ID, if they feel like the system has failed me many times, or if they have a criminal record that doesn't allow them to vote. So I just want to make sure that I also emphasize and articulate that in the ways that, like, some people may not choose to vote because the system has set them up for failure, or because they're taken by a system.
Yeah, that's super, super real. One of the things that I appreciate that, again, in my local communities, we started having hangouts where we would talk about issues on the ballot, not as like a way to persuade each other, but just to understand what the issue was and who was funding it. And I think, like, politics and religion and money are like the three things that rule this country with an iron fist. And we're also not supposed to talk about them. And I think that is a problem. I think that we need to talk about those things. But I think that it's so vital to find ways to talk about these things with each other in a way that's curious, that's centered in curiosity rather than in punishment and disciplinary action and control. Again, anarchist, I have no interest in controlling other people. I have things that I think are a good idea, and I go out and do them. And so by modeling, I hope other people say, oh, yeah, that does seem like a good idea. But I'm not going to demand other people do the things that I do. And I think that, I mean, that's part of why I've started voting absentee. I started recommending to people, like, if you can do that, then it's like you've got like 2 weeks where you have a ballot and you have a little more, like, it's a good reminder that you should research these things. You could do that in your own time. There's not a pressure on you. You don't have to remember all this stuff at the ballot box. I think that there are ways to make it easier and less stressful. And also, that is an important issue that I am happy to support activists working on, is voting access and voting education. Because I think that, yeah, I don't know if you've been noticing, we've devalued education generally in the United States over the past, I would say, like 10 years. Like, just thinking for yourself has been so undervalued. I remember even when I was in school, like, I would get homeschooled in addition to going to school. And the number of times I would get told off by my teachers for saying, wait, that doesn't sound like the history I learned. That sounds like a very specific history written by a very specific group of people. That wasn't encouraged, because it wasn't about learning how to think. It was about learning how to regurgitate information that was going to be on the SATs. So I feel like that sort of, I don't know, tearing apart of critical thinking has created a lot of issues, which then impact consent, of course, in many ways. I started my work as a consent activist, and as I delved deeper into it, I began to realize how that impacted literally everything in our lives, from how we can unionize at work or whether or not we can unionize at work, to medical consent and what we are allowed to give consent to, or like what information we are allowed to demand from the medical establishment, to actual consent at home.
With that in mind, let's hold that for after our break, because I would really love to dive more into the conversations around consent and what that means on a larger scale, but also what that means within our communities and like queerness and kink and sexuality and all of those things. So don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. This is Power Beyond Pride, a queer change-making podcast, and I'm Shane Lukas here with my co-host Hunter, and we are talking with the amazing and prolific Kitty Stryker, author of several amazing books. And I have to ask, it's one thing again, because your interests are across so many different areas, and you just spoke about it a little bit before break. Can you go a little bit more into why the consent conversation was the center of your first books, and kind of where, again, it's clear you drew some lines across varying parts of the movement, but why for you did you feel like this is where I feel like this conversation needs to start?
So when I first started working on consent culture, I was in my late 20s, and I was having a conversation with a dear friend of mine about the number of times we had our consent violated as submissive femmes in the Bay Area kink community. And we realized that it was so normal that we were joking, if we had a dime for every time it happened, we would have a sock full of dimes heavy enough to beat someone to death. Like, it was ridiculous.
That was very violent.
Often. Yeah, it was. Well, we were watching Born in Flames at the time, so I think we were feeling especially aggro. But there was that feeling of, wow, this is overwhelming how often this happens. And yet, when we try to talk about it, we're just told, oh, well, that's part of being submissive. That's part of learning your boundaries, is having people cross your boundaries. At the time, I was like, fuck that. That is ridiculous. I don't understand why that has to be the case. Why aren't we talking about abuse within these communities? Why aren't we talking about sexual assault? Why aren't we talking about predatory behaviors on people who have mental health issues sometimes? There's so many things that, like, just I found really, I recoiled very strongly. And then as I delved into it further, I was like, wait, okay, first of all, this is happening in ways that mirror power imbalances in culture at large. And there is this lack of understanding that you don't stop being queer, you don't stop being a woman, you don't stop being Black when you enter kink spaces. That can impact the dynamics, both consciously and subconsciously. And unless you are having really explicit conversations about that, you can find some abusive behaviors just sort of manifest and get their grips on you without you even noticing that's happening. And then as I delve deeper into that, and I'm a huge fan of the philosopher Foucault, which I think makes a lot of my work
yes.
make a lot of sense. I had a cat named Foucault for many years. And so
I just got wood, by the way.
like
I cited Foucault in my graduate thesis.
It's just great. And I think that it's really, once you realize that, you look back at my work, you go, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Because it's all about like, oh, okay, how does power influence the systems that we have in place? And how do the systems we have in place influence that power? And I think that as I delved into that, I began to say, okay, so this isn't just about power and kink. This is also about the ways in which our relationship to sexuality is influenced by the media that we consume and what we learn from our social interactions and our religious institutions and our educations at school. And so I kept on going back and zooming back and zooming back. And I became more and more overwhelmed, if I'm going to be completely honest. It was like, oh my God. I don't know if you guys remember that meme of the cat with its eyes pulled back and says, oh God, I can see forever. That's how I felt for sure. Because everything was so connected. How do you even begin to have these conversations, especially with a community who says, oh, we're all about safe, sane, and consensual. So we don't have problems with consent because look, it's right in the name.
That's the same conversation as if people say, I don't see color. Like they're still perpetuating a larger problem. If you say that you don't have a problem with these things, you're perpetuating a bigger issue.
Yeah. And I mean, I began to think about questions like, well, wait a minute, who runs the venues that these parties happen at? Interesting. They're almost all run by cisgender, heterosexual, white, male dominance. How might that influence how comfortable people feel coming to them if boundaries are crossed, right? Like how much stuff doesn't get reported because you're like, oh, the people in charge, like ultimately in charge of these spaces, maybe they're friends with the people who are being abusive. Maybe they're the ones being abusive themselves, which happens more often than not. Maybe they're not even aware that they're crossing boundaries because that is a subsection of men who are often told, well, keep pushing, you'll get a yes eventually. Don't take no for an answer. And if you're being told that when it comes to your career, why wouldn't you think that would be equally appropriate in your romantic and sexual relationships? Like, it's a mess.
Yeah, there's a very interesting way of seeing how people respond to being told no, because it'll tell you a lot about how often they hear that. And frequently also like how long did it take for them to experience rejection? And I think in a lot of those spaces where folks have not experienced rejection, there's a lot of privilege that comes with power, that comes with consent, that comes with boundaries. And the ways that all of those kind of intersect really make for a perfect storm in some circumstances. And so I'm very fascinated to know some more about how you have created a narrative that touches on these topics within kink and polyam groups, and how has that shaped your life and the life of those around you?
Well, I think as I began to delve deeper and deeper into this, was also around like as I was really beginning to solidify my thoughts. And after I had started consentculture.com and I had done surveys of the community to understand better how these power imbalances were manifesting and how consent was being violated and by whom, that was around the time that Gamergate happened. And wow, what a crossover event that was, because I began to realize that this was also a problem for men in particular, not exclusively, but in particular, who had heard no a lot and had become very resentful about it and had become incels, right? And began to claim that as an identity. We saw multiple cases of men committing mass violence because women had said no to them. There's been there was a case in California, actually around this time, I believe, where a man had hit on a trans woman at 2 a.m. She had said, honey, I'm trans. I don't think you want this. And he shot her in the genitals until she died.
Wow.
And that just happened right around the corner from the vegetarian restaurant that I went to all the time. So I think people don't really understand the level of low-key terror that marginalized people are just expected to live with and tolerate all the time. That is a possibility anytime you say no. And that is just unacceptable to me. So I guess, how has that influenced my life? Well, I stopped dating men. And very consciously, I kind of went to this, had so many relationships where I was like, even if you are trying, these things are still just in you. They're just in your veins in a way that I am exhausted trying to deal with in my personal life. I just can't do it anymore. And so this was around the time that I got sober. And so I put men in my sobriety app along with the other things that I enjoyed, but were ultimately bad for me. And I hate to say it, but wow, my life's improved so much. And that sucks. That really sucks. I don't want that to be the world that I live in. I don't want to be like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just moving to the Isle of Lesbos. Bye. That doesn't seem.
I mean, it sounds like a good time to me.
I mean, sort of. But look, here's the thing. I still deal with my property management, who are mostly run by men. I still deal with. I have a lot of male friends. I play Dungeons and Dragons. The number of men in that space who are fantastic. And
okay, I'm saving a question about your D&D character.
It's just, it's not isolationism. While tempting and while it does feel safe in some ways, it's not actually addressing the problem. So I started to say, okay, look, how do I start to talk about consent in ways that is maybe not condemning people for not understanding? Maybe when I said earlier, it's fucked up that this is what's being taught, that you figure out your boundaries by having them be crossed. I think there is a grain of truth to that. But maybe we can create a safer container wherein when you say, hey, that ended up being a boundary that got crossed, the other person feels safe saying, oh, shit, I'm really sorry. How can I help you feel safe right now? Rather than being afraid that, oh no, I crossed someone's boundary, I'm going to be ostracized. Therefore, I have to gaslight this person and shut them down so they don't believe that their boundaries got crossed. That is the way that things are now. That is kind of what incels like to do, is the similar kind of behavior of let's shut down dissenting opinions violently if necessary. What if we didn't do that? What if we actually made it okay to make mistakes? We made it okay to not know 100% of where your boundaries were or what consent was. I have to say, as much as I really hate some of the attitudes of second wave feminists, I began to understand oh, okay, what if you can't have 100% consent in our society? What if the systems of oppression in place make it so that under a white supremacist capitalist patriarchy, 100% consent isn't possible? Maybe then, if that's not the goal, what we're trying to do is get as close to that as we can, rather than it's either 100% or 0%. Maybe we begin to be more comfortable in that spectrum and be more comfortable making mistakes, learning from those mistakes so that we don't do them again, rather than feeling like we have to shut down any kind of conversation. Again, approaching things with curiosity and with, I don't know, I guess a comfort with accountability.
Well, my curiosity is, I mean, I love this conversation. And Kitty, it has been amazing hearing and talking about this, especially because I think we went in the span of those answers, we went from utter horror to like, actually, well, maybe some. So we're going to take a quick break. But when we come back, I want to also hear a little bit about your latest book, because I think it takes a much more optimistic tack in relationships among people that I think is pretty exciting. And then we have a speed round for you. So I'm pretty excited about.
Ooh, okay. I'm ready.
Excited for both. Yeah. So we'll be right back. So stick with us.
Welcome back to Power Beyond Pride, where we are talking with the activist, journalist, and powerhouse Kitty Stryker. I'm Hunter, and I'm here with my co-host Shane. So, Kitty, your latest book is all about having relationships as activists. Before the break, it felt like you were on a journey with reconciling connection and transformative change. What are you wanting to accomplish with this new book?
Well, so initially, when I proposed the book, the idea had been Love Rebels, Radical Relationships for Radical Activists. And it was going to be a guidebook and a how-to based off of some of the experiences that I had. I was going to interview other activists. And then Trump got elected, and I realized, oh shit, this could look like a manifesto, and this could out all of the activists who are mentioned in the book. I no longer feel comfortable writing something that names a bunch of marginalized people who are doing activism and details things about their activism. So I talked to my publisher and I pivoted to Love Rebels, How I Learned to Burn It Down Without Burning Out, which is more of it's still a bit of a guidebook, but it's also more of a memoir of my experiences as an activist. And while I talk about how to have relationships with people while still being an activist, and like how to have relationships with people who do agree with you, how to have relationships with people who don't agree with you slightly, how to have relationships with people who don't agree with you drastically, if you want to have relationships with those people, for example, family members who maybe you rely on for certain things, but also maybe they're anti-vaxxers, or they haven't explored their relationship to white supremacy, or they are transphobic. Figuring out how to maintain your sanity while still being in sort of a wider relationship with some of these people, and also just not bickering so much amongst leftists. Like, we have so many things we need to do before we can start talking about the intricacies of the final and ideal endpoints. Like, I don't agree with libertarians on lots of things, but we both agree on like ending qualified immunity for cops. Fine. You know what? Let's focus on that. We'll worry about the rest later. We'll talk about welfare later. Let's just do that and really get it done. So my current iteration of Love Rebels, which is coming out in October, is basically talking about how I learned to take the stick out of my own ass and refuse to shove it up other people's. Learn that ideological purity is not a goal, but constantly being open to listening and learning is. Yeah.
Love it. I mean, again, I think that kind of self-acknowledgement, that care, that recognition about, hey, my own well-being, right? I'm going to be here and I'm going to do this work, right? I have to make sure I'm taking care of these connections. I have to be able to relate to people. If it's about transformative change, it's still about people. And I love that your focus is really on, we can't, even if there's disagreements, especially in this particular climate and culture, like there's just this idea to just stop everything. And even among activists, like I think creating courageous spaces is really difficult to do because you get a lot of people in the same room who are all courageous and all have their own experiences, and there's got to be conflict. And then if you can do that in the room, and then you got to do that with people who just wholeheartedly disagree with you, but try to find that bridge, like it takes a minute and a reminder to do that. And your experience and your insight and your open-heartedness, like that is, again, a gift that I think you share through your writing, through your work. And obviously I've been grateful to witness that for so many years. Now, I want other people to get to know more about the gloriously rebellious lover, juggaloo, writer, anarchist that you are. And we're going to do that through a speed round. So these are going to be quick questions. And I want you to get the first answer that comes to you. What's the last book you read?
Oh, the last book that I read was Charlatan by Pope Brock, which is about Dr. John Brinkley, who was famous for sewing goat testicles into people's bodies to restore their vitality. He is also the reason why the FCC exists, because they had to keep trying to shut him down. The medical establishment had a hell of a time trying to get rid of him because it was during a time where we didn't really have so many medical standards, or like it was harder to follow up on such whether or not you had a diploma. So he started a AM radio station to hawk his snake oil and other people's snake oil.
And goat testicles.
Fascinating book. Honestly, read it. You will understand so much more about Trump's strategy from reading this book.
Thank you.
Okay. Your Dungeons and Dragon character identity and the name. And why did you choose that name?
Which one? But I have 3.
Okay.
But right now, I'll start with my main one is Doc Buck Brinkley, who is a snake oil salesman. And he thinks he's a cleric, but he is actually a bard warlock. And he is learning how to stop being so egotistical and start understanding his relationship to other people and the land.
Okay, your character has like a whole arc.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're starting with level 10 and moving. So like he's already had his big adventure, ended up in jail, and that's where this adventure begins. And my other character is Bagsy Sootfoot. She is a goblin. She is also level 10, and her adventure, which I actually played out, culminated in her basically becoming a very reluctant goblin Jesus in a way. She's sort of the figurehead for a religion that tries to get rid of aberrations. And now she is trying to escape that responsibility by going on another adventure.
My goodness.
Okay. She's an arcane trickster.
I love
and she has a raccoon named YOLO as her familiar.
YOLO. Oh, that's a great name for a raccoon. I love it. Okay. So what is a simple pleasure you appreciate every day?
Cooking for myself. I used to hate cooking. And I realized that part of the reason I hated cooking was because I didn't feel like I had enough time to really learn to do it properly. And part of it was because I kept dating people who liked to eat things like pizza rolls and had no understanding or appreciation for cooking. So it didn't feel like it was worthwhile learning. That I feel weird saying it, but thankfully we had a pandemic, which gave me a lot of time where I wasn't influenced by other people. And I learned that I really like cooking. And now I actually schedule out time to cook myself a full breakfast every morning and a dinner most nights. I usually make enough to have leftovers for one day. Granted, I do want to acknowledge I'm a professional writer, so I have a lot of time and it makes it a lot easier to do this. So that helps immensely. But I have a Patreon where I focus on publishing recipes that are helpful for people who don't have a lot of time, who maybe have a half an hour or need to figure out how to make a nourishing meal out of pantry staples. Yeah, so it's like it's helped me have a better relationship to food and nourishment. And it's amazing how much more energy I have since I started doing that. And,
One
and now I
cannot
can
live
feed
on
my
pizza rolls
community.
alone. Yeah.
Honestly, I'd be happy if I never saw a pizza roll again. Like, no shade to people who love them, but like there is a group of food that will absolutely give me diarrhea, and pizza rolls is one of them. No, thank you.
Oh my God. Okay. So 2 books, Totem and Taboo or The Birth of the Clinic?
Oh, The Birth of the Clinic.
I would have to agree. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I'm obsessed with the history of medicine. So, I mean, I'm planning on getting a tattoo of the map of Soho that helped Jon Snow understand the cholera epidemic.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Like,
so I'm also
I
public health.
have molecules all over my, oh, you can't really see. There you go. I have nipedilactin, the active ingredient catnip. I have ether on the back of my neck. Yeah.
Nice.
All
My
right.
background's in public health. And so all these things are like really sticking together right now. Amazing.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Kitty, what's the
Yes.
kink that brings you joy?
I'm like super asexual now. The kink that probably brings me the most joy, even though I identify very strongly as asexual, I actually really love sexual performance. So like I loved doing live sex shows. I love performing in porn. I realized at some point, I was a sex worker for 14 years. And like, I realized at some point, the reason why I liked sex work so much is it had a very clear container. And I would just go hog wild within that container. But as soon as I was at home, I was like, oh, that's work. I don't want to do that. Like, so I feel like if it is weird sexual performance, I am intellectually and physically super into it. Anything else, I'm just kind of like, I mean, I've got my cooking, I've got my gardening, I got to take care of my cats. Like, I'm busy. I got to play Baldur's Gate 3 obsessively. I don't have time for that nonsense. But if you give me an opportunity to like fuck somebody in a box truck surrounded by blindfolded people, oh yeah, I'm there.
This scenario feels like
different.
I have so many questions about
The box truck?
It was very specific. Yes.
Oh yeah, that happened. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So cuddles or conversation?
Conversation. I'm very feral. Like I was brought up on the East Coast. We hugged each other maybe if someone died. I'm working on that now. But in general, if someone's, hey, do you want to come over and cuddle? I'm like, why? Thankfully, I have a partner that I've been friends with and romantic with for a long time who understands that I am a feral beast and is fine with that.
I love it.
Awesome.
What's one question you wish people would ask you more often?
Wow. I feel like I get a wide array of questions. I think, that was probably the one that's hardest for me to think about. Maybe like I get asked this sometimes, but not enough. I love to talk about how I got into the Juggalo world and why and what I've learned while I've been there. My goal one day is to actually publish a sort of pop culture Juggalo ethnography, not academic so much, but like just to explain the ways in which I think Juggalo culture actually has a wider resonance for particularly white working class men and like how it is surprisingly leftist in ways that you wouldn't expect.
Can you do like a 1 to 2 sentence kind of explanation? Because I know we mentioned Juggalo culture. I realized we probably didn't talk about it and the Insane Clown Posse. But do you have like 2, or could you give 2 sentences so that people are familiar who may not be familiar with Juggalo culture itself?
Oh, I mean, so Juggalo culture, in so much as it is a culture, are a bunch of fans who dress up as clowns, like horror clowns, in like black and white face paint generally. They are fans of the Insane Clown Posse, who is a rap rock duo, I would say, from Detroit, who's been around for 20 years, 30 years, something like that, like a long time. They have a reputation for being unruly and violent and uncomfortable to be around. In practice, they do have some misogyny things to work out, but are surprisingly open to talking about them if you don't talk down to them. And I have never seen a group as enthusiastic about shitting on a Confederate flag as a group of Juggalos. They really hate racism.
That's a great summary. That's a great.
Yeah.
I love, and one of them even ran for president. So, like I say, there's even that too, right? So there's definitely.
And I think Violent J actually endorsed Kamala Harris, which was like, honestly, they generally stay out of politics in that way, but I was surprised. He said it very offhanded. I don't know that he thought about it much, but yeah, they're amusing.
Pretty fun.
Okay, so where can people learn more about you?
So I am mostly on Blue Sky now since I sacrificed my Twitter account to making fun of libs of TikTok 2 years ago. So I'm on Blue Sky as Kitty Stryker. You can also find me on Instagram. I'm Kitty_Stryker. I'm on Facebook, but trying to pull myself off it. I'm generally trying to get off of Meta. So I'll probably be on Instagram for a while. I'm trying to avoid Facebook as much as possible, but you can see officially Kitty Stryker is where I'll post stuff about my books and things like that. Interestingly, I'm not allowed to advertise my books on Facebook because consent is considered obscene by Facebook Marketplace. Hooray for that.
Wow.
And yeah, I have a website that I need to revamp, kittystryker.com.
So, Kitty, we have so much more to talk about. I know we did not get to everything today. I wanted to
we
also
might have to make
say,
this a two-parter.
yeah, we would love to have you back to have a conversation, especially
love
because
that.
I know you're working on a new book. So
Yes.
I don't know if you want to say like a couple sentences about that, and then we'll have to carry that for our next conversation.
So as soon as I finished Love Rebels, and before it's even come out, I proposed and got accepted a book, A Good Kid's Guide to Rebellion, which is going to be a book specifically talking to children or teenagers who grew up in like high control religions, evangelical households, cults, that kind of thing, about how to have critical thinking, how to embrace autonomy and individualism, or individuality, I should say, while not necessarily completely distancing themselves from how they grew up, but learning how to look at that through another lens. And it's been really inspired by an evangelical teen that I've been mentoring, and seeing how when I met him, he was queer, suicidal, didn't see a way out. And now he's looking forward to going to college. He has discovered that he's really into thinking about astronomy and understanding the vastness, like seeing God in a different way, and being able to like help as an anarchist atheist, being able to be that presence for him and be reassuring and allow him space to make mistakes and sometimes say things that are a little fucked up without distancing myself from him and telling him that he's bad. The number of times this kid has said, wow, I disagreed with you and you didn't get angry at me, is heartbreaking. And it made me realize, like, I have to teach these kids how to become the rebel in some capacity, because they are either going to get out of those households and double down and become just like their parents, or they are going to hurt themselves with the drugs and sex that they have. And so I want to, as a former bad kid myself, I want to sort of help them a little bit along that path.
Well, thank you for making space for all of us rebels here. And again, we are so grateful you joined us today. I want to say thank you again. We would love to have you back. We will stay in contact with you. You can follow Kitty on all of our channels. We're going to go ahead and post those along with the podcast, so you'll be able to do that. I'm your co-host, Shane Lukas. And again, I'm owner of A Great Idea, an activist, and just an adoring fan of the amazing Kitty Stryker. And you can follow me on my socials and at my site, shanelukas.com.
Thank you so much, Kitty. And I'm your co-host, Hunter. Once again, I'm 3 feral raccoons in a trench coat. And you can follow me on my social, Hunter Photography on Instagram. It's HNTR-graphy because I'm fancy. So remember to subscribe and get your friends to subscribe to Power Beyond Pride on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And check out our site at powerbeyondpride.com.
Power Beyond Pride is a project from A Great Idea, a queer-owned design and content agency. Learn more about them at agreatidea.com.
This episode is produced by Shane Lukas. Smita Sarkar is our project developer. Our editor is Jarrett Redding, with support from Ian Wilson.
And Hunter and I are both part of this podcast's awesome host team, and we invite you to send in your questions and comments to all of us at powerbeyondpride.com.
Check out our new episodes each week, and we look forward to queer change making with you next time. Thank you from all of us at Power Beyond Pride.